Joining us on the line is Jim Carafano, leading expert in national security and foreign policy challenges, vice president of Heritage's Catherine and Shelby Cullum Davis Institute for National Security and Foreign Policy. Jim, thanks so much for joining the show. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great to be with you from D.C., where the razor wire is down and the sun is out.
Well, that's exciting stuff. Well, let's talk about something that is obviously maybe exciting news. It sort of depends on how you view it. I'm very skeptical of Joe Biden's announcement that he is now going to pull all troops out of Afghanistan by September 11th, obviously a very political date. It is fairly obvious that he said it himself, this is a conditions-independent move. Namely, the Taliban could start firing rockets at our soldiers today, and he would still withdraw all of our troops by September 11th. What do you make of this foreign policy move? Does the United States still have a continuing interest in keeping some sort of skeleton force in Afghanistan?
Well, we should make clear that this is not Trump's plan. Trump's plan is, look, American forces don't need to be anywhere in the world they don't need to be, right? And so his idea of withdrawal was what's conditions-based, because Trump recognized that the U.S. has two significant interests in Afghanistan. One is, look, we don't want it to become a haven for transnational terrorists again. And the other is we want South Asia to be stable. And we don't want Afghanistan to be a problem because we want India focused like a laser beam on helping us deal with China. And the Trump plan is when we've reached a situation where those troops are not necessary anymore, then we will bring them out. Biden just says, look, I don't care about conditions. We're just pulling the troops out. What's problematic with that announcement is he hasn't explained to us how he's going to protect Americans' interests. So without knowing one without the other, it leaves a lot of questions. And your point about the date is, I think that was just a terrible decision. This notion that, we're making it essentially a PR stunt. I mean, it's just the optics are all bad. And if I were a terrorist, I would be saying, look, I don't care what I ever accomplish in my life, but all I have to do is I have to do a terrorist attack against the United States on September 11th, 2021 to make Joe Biden look like an idiot.
So meanwhile, this sort of conditions-independent notion that Biden is pushing forward here, it seems to be a thoroughgoing line in this administration, that they're not even going to look at conditions on the ground. They're not going to look at what's actually happening in the world. They're just going to forge forth with whatever they think is their ideological endpoint. Specifically here, I'm citing their moves on Iran. So Iran has announced they're going to ratchet up their nuclear production in response to the fact that the Israelis somehow and incredibly blew up their nuclear facility in Natanz. The Biden administration has now said that they are going to start relieving sanctions on Iran, basically regardless of what Iran does at this point. It's fairly incredible that we have an administration that is openly announcing concessions on the basis of no actual concessions on the other side.
So there is a clear pattern in this administration, which is where they actually drift from the last administration, whether it's the border or Iran or in Afghanistan, they actually get themselves in the most trouble. Where they actually kind of follow along what the last administration did, they're usually fine. And the reason for that is Trump's foreign policies weren't Republican or Democrat or isolationist or crazy or tweeting or orange hair. They were just, we live in an era of great power competition. What best affects the people we're competing with, whether it's the Islamist terrorists or Iran or North Korea or Russia or China. And so they work. And so obviously when Biden departs from them, that's when he gets into trouble. Look, I think the key thing people have to understand about the Iran nuclear program is it's not a conveyor belt. People think, well, we do something, it slows down. We don't do something, it speeds up. The reality is Iran has all the infrastructure and capabilities it needs to build nuclear weapons. Going nuclear for them is a political decision. And what will keep them from going nuclear is creating a risk calculus that makes it think it's not in their favor. So the pressure and the isolation are absolutely key and vital. And essentially negotiate all that away on day one for literally nothing puts the administration in a very weak position. In a few months, they're going to be in one or two places. Either they're going to realize they're not going to get a better deal, and they're just going to give the Iranians what they want. They'll lose a lot of face and a lot of credibility in the region, open up the door for China and Russia, among others. Or they're going to wind up going and doing exactly what Trump did and conducting a maximum pressure campaign. In the meanwhile, they will waste weeks and months frittering away time that they could be used to further ratchet down in Iran in a fruitless attempt to live out their ideological dream that everything Obama did was right and everything Trump did was wrong.
Now, speaking of Obama policy versus Trump policy, we're seeing the wages of Joe Biden's policy on the southern border, where we have the most immigrant children, migrant children, illegal immigrant children being held on the border at any time in American history. It used to be called kids in cages. Now it's children in detention facilities. is the way the media like to term it. But there's been unquestionably a massive wave of unaccompanied minors who are arriving on America's southern border. Biden not only has no plan to deal with it, he then designated Kamala Harris the person to handle the border. She's not visited the border. She's not given it, so far as I'm aware, a press conference on the border. She has done a story with the Washington Post about how much she loves crocheting. So what exactly is the Biden policy on the border at this point, if it even exists, other than basically just hope that the media stops covering it?
Yeah. Well, their policy is they said they want to get to the root causes of the problem. Well, we actually looked at the root causes of the problem and we figured out what they are. The root cause of the problem is Biden. I mean, his policies have created an unprecedented crisis. And here's how it's going to get way worse. Nobody's been talking about this. Have you looked at Biden's proposed budget? Most of it is like a 14% increase in discretionary spending. Every federal agency gets showered with cash, except, of course, DOD and Homeland Security. The increase for Homeland Security is 1/4 the rate of inflation. So they're going to lose enormous buying power. And he is burning through cash at an unprecedented rate. And he is essentially cutting the resources of the Department of Homeland Security. So everything that department does, the Coast Guard rescuing people at sea, FEMA coming in after a hurricane, all that stuff is going to be gutted to fuel all this cash for his border crisis, cash which is doing nothing. It reminds it, if Winston Churchill he was here, he would say, never before have so few spent so much to accomplish so little.
Yeah, it really is impressive the way that the Biden administration seems to be failing at nearly everything they're trying, and yet they are treated as though they're just being met with wild success. The fact is that this entire administration seems to be an exercise in jumping out in front of successful parades and declaring themselves leading the parades, while simultaneously then leading the parade down into some dead ends and a pileup occurring. James Carafano, leading expert in national security for Heritage Foundation, really appreciate your time and your insight.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching the Heritage Foundation's YouTube channel. With more than 500,000 members, we are the nation's largest conservative research and education institution. We believe the principles and ideas of the American founding are worth conserving and renewing. Please help us further our mission by subscribing to this channel and sharing our videos with your family and friends.